All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to start this live stream off. And what we're going to do today is check out and finish this Vuedle app. We're not going to check it out. We have already been working on it. So if you have not been participating in the last couple streams, what we've been doing is building a Wordle clone. And what we've built so far is a mostly working app here. We can put in our guess, we'll hit enter, and that was a bad demo because that's correct. Okay, so we'll start off with a word. We know that we've got the U in the right spot. We know that we have an R, and so on. We can guess different things and win the game. So what we don't have is the ability for the game to actually change the answer every day. So we always have the same answer, which that's not much of a game, is it? So we need to add that in. That's the first thing. The second thing is you'll notice we have this hydration rendering error. We're going to take a look at that and see if we can figure that out. And I also want to deploy this towards the end of the stream. It might do it after the stream. Not really that interesting in my opinion, so no reason to really do it on the stream. So we'll see how we go. We might want to also make this responsive because then we can play it on mobile and so on. Right now it's not responsive, as you can tell. And yeah, we're gonna go for it. So yeah, I'm gonna work on the actual answers first because I think that's the more interesting thing to work on. So if you want a refresher, we have this keyboard component which takes in all of the input, and this is the only component that's actually rendered on the client side. We're actually only doing server-side rendering for the rest of the app. So you'll notice this keyboard is client-side only, or it's not client-side only, it's regular Nuxt component, so it's rendered on the server and then hydrated on the client. Then we have our word grid component, which is this component here, and this is rendered entirely on the server. Every time that we get new props, and so the props are an array of different guesses that we've given, the correct answer, as well as the current guess, so that as we type in new things, we get new props into here. And every time these props change, our app is going to make a new network request to the Nuxt app on the back end. We're going to re-render the component on the server side and then send it back, send just the HTML back for that component, and then it will re-render. And so what's interesting about that is if we add a letter and then we hit the backspace, well, actually, we're going back to a component or a set of props that we've already created. And so that result is cached. And so we'll see that it re-renders instantly. And that is a bug. I believe that I broke the app a little bit. But yeah, you may notice that there is a slight delay when I click. I guess you can't see when I'm clicking, so it actually doesn't show up for you. But there is a slight delay from when I click to when that letter shows up in the game board, and that is because of that round trip from the client to the browser. So once this is deployed, that lag will be a bit more noticeable, and so it might be an interesting user experience thing we might have to deal with, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. The point of this was to build an app that uses Nuxt Server Components, and we're doing that. So we have our game state. The current answer is so far just hard-coded in here, but we can pretty easily come up with some utility method that will grab that based on the date. And the other thing that we want to do is try and keep this answer on the server as if at all possible. So that way, one of the problems with the current game of Wordle is that all done on the client side, and so people have been cheating. And it's easy to cheat because you can just look in the source code and see the entire word list. So with this approach, because we're only rendering everything on the server, we can get that security by having the answer not revealed on the client side. So we're going to try and figure out how we can do that, because currently we have our game app, which is not a server component, because we need this interactivity for the game. However, because the answer is the same the entire day, and we can figure out what the answer is based on the current day, you don't actually need to pass this answer in as prop to our word grid. We can actually just grab that word, the correct answer, on the server inside of this component. We don't need to pass it in. So we're going to make that happen. So we'll create a utility for this, because we don't need it to be reactive. We'll just call it answer.ts, and we'll do something pretty simple. We'll say return trust, and we'll remove the prop, answer prop, from our word grid component. And we'll say const answer equals, we're going to have to rename this so that we can, the method name will be better, because Nuxt will will auto import it. So get answer. Then we're going to pass the answer in here to our use guesses composable. Great. So if we do this, we should get it working correctly. So if we put in trust, it says that is correct. I can't remember what we put in here. Yeah, okay. So we put that, that's what we put in. If I put in truth, it renders this correctly. Perfect. So now we need to also do that for the keyboard, except the keyboard is rendered on the client side. So I'm not sure if we can actually get this to work the way that we want it to, because the keyboard needs to have the knowledge of this answer, but it is also rendered on the client. So there might be some way of separating, some weird hacky thing. The first thing that came to my mind was to separate the rendering of the backgrounds, which gives you the information of which letters are in the answer, or which answers that they're in the right position. Separate that from the interactivity. And so we could have like this rendered as a background, which is rendered on the server, and then overlay the actual interactive elements on top of that, so on the client, so that we get that interactivity. That sounds like a way of making that work. However, I don't really want to do that, because that sounds like a terrible solution. Okay, we'll see how much we actually care about this keeping the answer on the server thing. And if we have time at the end, then maybe I'll get to that. So the next thing is actually changing the answer based on the day. So we can actually find a Wordle word list, because, as I mentioned, the entire word list is available on the client side. So people have figured this out. Why is this not increasing my page size? Wow. Okay, there we go. So someone here has, oh boy, there's a lot of lag. What is going on? Okay. Someone here has put together all of the different Wordle words that are valid. And okay, this list is, I believe, all 5-letter words in the English dictionary, or in, yeah, all 5-letter words essentially. But Wordle does not use all of these words because most of these are not common. No one knows what, like, I don't know what Zooks or Zowie. These are not words that people commonly use. So we'll try and find an actual Wordle word list. See if we can find it on GitHub. Here is a list of words. This is also 15,000. I think the actual word list is like 2,500 or something. Okay, here we go. This is an actual, okay, here we go. This is the one we want. 2,300 words-ish. And it looks like it's already in a nice JSON format. So we will just save this to my file here. Where do I want to save this into? We'll do it into utils words.json. Okay. Now we have all of the answers. We've got our words.json in our folder here. We'll import that. And then we'll just double check that this is going to work the way that we want. What's the first word? Is a back. So if I try to put in the word, ooh, we've got a bug here. Something is going on. Vite does not seem to like what's going on here. We have a trailing comma. That's not valid JSON. That's why it was complaining. Now it should work correctly. And if we do, okay, maybe we'll restart this. And hopefully it'll work. Okay, there we go. So if we put in track, then it does not seem to like. Okay, so the word is a back. Because these are all lowercase while our game is being played in uppercase. We've got these tiny little bugs. Okay, so then we do track and then we guess a back. Wait, okay. Now we got the word list in. We need to figure out how to grab current date. And we'll do a day. We'll grab, how do we want to do this? We don't want to grab, we're going to get the date. We want to grab it so that every day we're going to, every day we'll have a unique number. But if we do just get day, we'll get like the the day of the month, which is not what we want because then we'll only have like 30 answers. But if I do like days since epoch, yeah, that works. Is this actually correct? I don't know. Days, probably correct. Okay, days since year 0. We've got 739,000. We'll see what this comes up with. 19,000. Okay, well, we'll just do 1,000 milliseconds in a second, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. There you go. So now we're dividing, we're going to get the current time in milliseconds. Then we'll divide that by the number of milliseconds in a day. So we'll get the number of days since the epoch. What day is that defined as? Is that in 1970? Yeah. 1st of January 1970. Why is this one say 739,000? Is this, oh, this is MySQL. Why is this? Okay, here we go. This is the number we want. 19,909. That is correct. 19,909 down here. We're doing our math correctly. Now, we need to mod the length. This is exactly what I was going to do. Copilot got ahead of me on this one. So we're going to take the days since 1970, and we're going to do a modulus operator on or with the length of the words. And so whenever we hit the end of it, it'll always wrap around for us. So I don't know what the current answer would be now, because I don't know what 19,909 mod whatever, however many words we have is. So we'll try doing trust. Okay, so we've got a U in the third location. We got a P and then a U. Wow. Playing this game live is very difficult, but this is a word that is not, that I don't know. But if we refresh it, we'll see that it is plume. Yes, I would not have guessed that. It is a word that I am familiar with, but I would not guess it live like this. It might take me a while. I don't play this game, you know, and I'm not very good at it. But now we've got a new word every single day. So today's word in this app is plume. There you go. So we don't need to log that out. I just wanted to check that it was working. And there we go. Not a whole lot of work. Now the game will change the word every day based on today's date, and whatever the length of the words is, it'll like wrap around once we get to the end. However, we have one issue, and that is that all of this is alphabetical. So that's not that fun. If you know that the words are alphabetical, then you know that today's word is plume. Well, then tomorrow you're going to start out with a word that starts with P, L, something, something. So we want to randomize this somewhat. And that's the tricky bit. How do we randomize this in a way that is deterministic and going to be consistent? Because we don't want everyone who plays this to get a different random word in the day. The point is that it's the same for everyone. So the way that I think we will do this is that we can, I think we can do a random number passing in a seed number. But it looks like the built-in math.random does not do that. Crypto.getRandom values might let me do this. One way I could do it is to just randomize them myself, and then I don't have to write it in here. And then just save the JSON randomized, and then that way this code stays the same. We just do that randomization one time. But I think there might be a way of doing this without that. We'll see. Okay, so Stack Overflow is giving me some interesting things here. We'll see if I can just get this going. Parameter A is, I don't think we're doing some bit shifting and I don't actually know what's going on here. We're basically generating some numbers using, it's supposed to be somewhat random, but the A that we pass in here is the seed. So in theory, it should be the same if we pass in the same number. And if we use the current date as the seed, then it should work. This function returns a function, so I need to adjust for that. So if I pass in the same seed, then we get the same number repeated. So then we'll create a new function for ourselves, get random int then we'll move. Actually, there's no reason to create a new thing here. So we'll use days since epoch as our seed. The random number will be that. Then we'll want to, we'll use math.floor. So we'll take the random number times the length of the words that we've got, so we can multiply it to cover the whole range of words, because math.random, random number generators usually return a number between 0 and 1. And so then it will return a number between 0 and the number of words we've got. Then we do math.floor because we want to get an integer and not a floating point number. And then we can use that index to get our word. And we want to make sure that our word will be the same consistently. So now our word is going to be saver. If we used days since epoch 1, so tomorrow's word, it's tenor, which is not right after it in the dictionary, I believe. Not at all. There's a whole bunch of words in between. And then if we did the next day, then we get suave. And we can keep going like that. So it'll randomly, in quotation marks, generate a number. But the randomness is not, this is how random number generators work, is that they're not actually fully random. They are just like more or less random because we're doing all of this crazy like bit manipulation. So the actual number that we get feels random, but it's always based on some input number. And generally this input number is, the current time in milliseconds. So every time you run this, it is always different, or more or less different. But if we pass in today's date as a day and we pass in the same thing over and over and over again, we get the same number out of this, because this is just doing some work on a number. And so if we have the same input, we're going to get the same output. And that's how that works. So then this means that for us, we get a different number that's basically, it's all mixed up, but the way that it's mixed up, the way that it's shuffled is always the same every time. And now we don't have to worry about the words being done in a alphabetical order, and we also don't have to worry about modifying this list, and we can keep it the way that we got it and alphabetized, and that's great. And I actually prefer it this way because there's sort of like this separation between configuration and business logic that I think is, or not configuration, but state or data, I guess is the right way of doing it. And if you would store these words in a database, you wouldn't want to store these words in a randomized order, because that's impossible to manage. If you needed to add in a word or modify a word or something like that, you can't deal with this if it's not alphabetized. And so storing it like this could be completely different and separate from how we're going to actually use it in our app. Although not always, we obviously want to consider how we're going to use it when we think about how we're going to save the data. But in this case, we want to save it in a way that's easy to manage, and then we can do all that randomization and all that fun stuff in our editor here in the code. Okay, so first goal done. We have all the answers, and they're going to update every single day. We're going to get a new answer based on the day. Now we need to tackle the fact that this keyboard thing is broken and doesn't work correctly because it is really annoying me. So one way that we can debug our hydration errors is by using the Nuxt hydration module. I believe that's what it is. Nuxt hydration. Why can't I find this now? Yes, there we go. It's still under development, but it is useful. And we're going to do that. So if we do pnpm add hydration. And then we'll go to our Nuxt big and we'll pop this in as well. Nuxt hydration. And now when we run it, we'll get a little warning error message thing popping up telling us that there is an error in our app in terms of hydration. And it tells us that it's in this game component. And it tells us that here we go. Tells us the SSR rendered HTML mismatch. Although I cannot scroll in this or really see what's going on here. Okay. So there's some sort of mismatch in the game app. Is it in the keyboard or is it in the game board? I do not know. So here it looks like we render out the keyboard and the game or the word grid is not being rendered on the server because it's not showing up in here. So that is confusing. So we're going to try and figure out what's going on here. We're going to go into our game and we're going to see. So if I comment this out, this still, this is my current method for debugging hydration errors. It seems to work all right. So if I comment these two out, the hydration errors go away. So I suspect that it's in the win-lose component. Yeah, that's not true. Because I still get some hydration errors. But it's in the Uno CSS and the Nuxt hydration module doesn't seem to care or catch it. That's a little confusing to me, honestly, because this is telling me I've got hydration mismatches, but the Nuxt hydration tool does not say that. Then if I do win-lose, then that screws everything up. So what's going on in win-lose is that we've got this VF here. It's potentially because it's not a single root, but because of this VIF and VElse if, it's going to only ever render one of these at a time. So that doesn't seem to be it. But let me just wrap this whole thing in a div just to be safe. So that didn't fix it. So that is not answer. So if guesses at the last guess is equal to the answer, we are going to say win. Otherwise, we're going to say you lose. Because I don't have a v else condition. Is that why? No, that's not why. Are the guesses and my answer from the game, these should all be the same. When it gets hydrated versus when it doesn't. Like on the server versus on the client side. So I don't know what is going on. Because especially when if I do like a hard refresh, everything's initialized to an empty state and it should all be fine. But if yeah, it's strange. So now when I comment out this word grid, it shows up in here. But if I, as a comment, but if I pop this out, or if I uncomment it and I re-render, then it doesn't show up in here anymore. And so I'm wondering why it would do this to me. Overflow, Y, scroll. Okay, now. Nope. Okay. So now it doesn't render. It renders the keyboard. But it doesn't render the win-lose. And it doesn't render the game or the word grid. Which of course would give me hydration errors. But why do these hydration errors exist in the first place? I don't know. And I don't want to just wrap it in like client only because they are server side only components. And even if I like that, so that doesn't help. So that is one way to hack around the hydration errors, is to just avoid hydration in the first place. You can't figure it out. You know, sometimes like you've spent an hour or many hours trying to solve an error. Sometimes you just need to like do a quick and dirty hack so that it works and then move on because you need to ship a feature, and you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to see. I think there's something funny going on with the word grid, but I think it's mostly going on with this win-lose thing. And I don't think that my answer is changing. Like if I pass in an empty array and an empty string and I hard code that in, it still gives me these hydration errors. Why is it hydrating differently? That doesn't make any sense. Is it the keyboard that's hydrating funny? And if I just refresh this, it works. Like the keyboard is causing hydration mismatches on the other components somehow. Like this seems to work fine. It doesn't render anything now, which is also bizarre. So win-lose.server, okay, it's an empty div, that's great, but this word grid, something is going on in the word grid that doesn't make much sense. That's causing it to be rendered in a weird way. Huh. You know, I think I'm only going to spend a bit more time on this, and then I'm just going to move on because it's hard to debug on a live stream, and at some point I just stop caring about fixing this issue, and you know, I just want to do the next thing and move on. Okay, so there's something going on in our game word grid component that's causing this weird hydration error. And causing it to not even render. Okay, so this word grid will be rendered. Let me just double check in the vector here. Index.server. Okay, so that's from my page. That's from my game component. And then it just has these commented out. But why is keyboard in here twice? Like, obviously that's weird. And strange. This win-lose. Maybe there is an issue here with, I mean, it's technically single root, but not when it, not as, like, it renders as a single root, but it's not a single root. Still nothing. I don't know why it's rendering. Okay. This, we still see word grid. See, this is very confusing to me. Get that out of the way. We've got our word grid, and we've got 2 comments for the keyboard, but that's not what our source code is. We have a win-lose component and then the keyboard. And so it's something funny is going on where it's rendering this keyboard as a, in the win-lose component, something like that. If I make these components not server components, then I would expect no hydration errors. We'll see if we still get those same hydration errors. No hydration errors. That's great. No hydration errors. We get our word grid up. No hydration errors. We get our keyboard up. So there's something going on with the Nuxt Server Components. I don't know. This is a weird edge case of something that I'm doing wrong. If this is a bug in the implementation of Nuxt Server Components, I'm usually pretty hesitant to assume that the fault lies with the actual library. However, this is still marked as experimental feature, so that makes me feel like that's a little bit more likely. But usually 98% of the time, at least, because I'm doing something weird. Okay, so when I have them as client, as like regular Nuxt components, they work fine. There's no hydration errors. Also, the funny thing is that these are server components, and server components aren't hydrated. That's the whole point of a server component, right? So why would having a server component mess up your hydration? I don't know. And so that's why. So now we're getting errors in the win-lose component and the game component. Like this is not the. This is so. The game component is now rendering win-lose and the keyboard, but it is not showing up. The word grid is not showing up in here. When I go to win-lose, this is actually the keyboard component. So why, I don't know if it's the plugin that's showing me the wrong thing, or if Nuxt is doing the wrong thing under the hood. It seems like something weird is happening. We have our game. We have win-lose, which is being rendered as a regular Nuxt component, just like we would expect. It's just an empty div. Then we have our keyboard component and a second keyboard component. It has. So this is funny. Something is strange going on here. This says keyboard.view, but then we have an empty div in here. So it's essentially duplicating the HTML for the win-lose view component. And then we have the actual keyboard here. So it's like duplicating, it's like somehow mixing server components and regular components in this way is siblings, is causing the server rendering to be messed up. That's my best guess at this point. If I make them all server components, then we can maybe test my hypothesis here. We won't have interactivity, but maybe it'll render without hydration errors. Nope. Okay. Now it's just saying the whole thing is wrong. So I, really at a loss. But is it actually a hydration error or what? Because We have our game page. We have our page here, and then we have data island UID for the game, but the game is not a server component. I don't know why it would have an island. I'm not familiar with the internals of how Nuxt island components and Nuxt server components work. I'm just flailing around here. So here it renders the game board or the game component. It renders the word thing. It renders the win lose, and then it renders the keyboard exactly as we would expect. So why don't I put in some fake guesses? Current guess is, I don't know. We'll change this. So if I refresh, then there's hydration error, but it seems to be rendering things correctly now. It just obviously we don't get interaction because there's no JavaScript on the page. So yeah, interesting things that we've come up against here, in that it seems like there are some issues with having sibling components being a mix of server components and not server components. If I go back to this game board, I don't know if there's anything I can do here. Potentially, if I'd make this page no longer a server rendered page, maybe that will fix it. One can only hope. Okay, we're figuring things out. We're learning things. This is how I typically go through stuff and figure stuff out, is that I see something that seems weird, and then I have to, you know, put on some hypothesis and then test it, sort of scientifically, but not really scientifically. And then I go through some different edge cases. I try and find those edge cases, and then maybe we learn some things. Maybe we don't. Maybe we just end up more confused with more questions than we started. That also happens. Sometimes I end up in a rabbit hole trying to figure out why some like really specific edge case doesn't work, and then I get annoyed. Okay. So if I render, I mean, it seems to render correctly. Here, except it's giving me hydration errors, but that's a separate thing. And we've got interactivity, and I can do it, and then I can guess final answer. I win. Oh yeah, right. Because the keyboard and yeah, the word grid is using the new randomized answer, whereas the keyboard and this win-lose component are not. All right. So now my conclusion is that mixing server components and client components inside of mixing these server components and client and regular Nuxt components, interactive components, I guess, inside of an interactive component inside of a server rendered page does not work. However, if your page is a regular isomorphic page, then it does work. So we don't need this anymore because we're just going to render it like normal. All right. So that's a fun little edge case for you if you want to write that down or, I don't know, remember it somehow. And, oh, interesting. Wait a second. What just happened is, let me go back to this page. So I have hydration, no hydration errors listed. If I go Nuxt client on this, I refresh, now I've got hydration errors. So something about it trying to make it interactive. Well, I mean, it doesn't make any sense that it would be like this. Like this Nuxt client attribute only matters when you're adding interactivity into a server only component. So if I change this back, maybe we can figure out a way to get rid of this extra hydration error. So we've got the server and it doesn't work and we get a hydration error. If I remove this, we get rid of the hydration error and things are great. However, we don't get interactivity. So there's something about adding interactivity. We have two separate issues that are occurring here. Something about adding interactivity like this into a server component, or potentially maybe it's just this server only page that's happening, causes this this hydration error where it's doing this. And mixing then these two, like different kinds of components, is causing some issues. That might actually be the same issue. But I'm going to have to come back to that. I've spent way more time on this than I ever wanted to. And now let's move on to doing something interesting. Okay. So to fix all of this, we just basically take this page. We were rendering this page as a server only page. Now we're just rendering it as a regular page to avoid these weird hydration, but not really hydration errors, because these are server components that don't get hydrated. So by doing that, we fixed that. And I will disable this Nuxt hydration module because I don't want to have that little floating thing in the top left anymore. All right. So now we're going to go back to our game board here. We're going to reset this. So we start out with empty state. And now we need to, instead of passing in the answer through props, we're going to pass the answer in using our new method that we've got. So I go to win lose, we can do answer equals get answer. And that should line up perfect for us. And then in our keyboard component, we're going to have to do this as well. Do define props and define emits at the top. Then we'll define the keys and the answer, and we will add that in. I don't think, okay, we do have to have answer. We have no other places where we are using the answer prop, so now it should work. This is using an object, so I'll just quickly fix that. And if we now play the game, I believe our answer was plume for the day. No, no, because we changed the implementation of that. I thought it was like saver, and then no, but that's incorrect. Oh boy. See, now I have to actually like play the game to figure this out. Or I could cheat and do something else, but I don't want to do that. So it ends with an E. And has an S in it. There we go. Okay, so the problem now is that although we're not exposing the answer in the win-lose or word grid components because they are only rendered on the server, we are exposing the answer in the keyboard. So we have to pass that data in to the client here. So how do we get this to work? I just had a solution. So before I was talking to you about having a hacky solution for somehow separating basically the rendering of the background colors, and that gets computed on the server and rendered. And then we have a separate component that gets layered on top that's like the buttons. We've got like the background and then the buttons on top. And that way we could not send the answer to the client, but still have that interactivity. Well, I just remembered that we can do these paired components where we've got a server component and we have a client component. And so these get, so on the server, we'll render the server component, and then on the client, we'll actually hydrate the client. So what we can do is, in this component, the server one will compute the colors of everything. Then those colors will get hydrated to the client without exposing the answer on the client. So here, we'll get rid of that because we're not going to get the answer. We're also, but I don't know if this will work because what happens is it'll render on the server, then on the client, it will render. But then if it needs to recompute, like when you update props, it'll re-render the client component, not re-render the server component. So this may not actually work, but we'll see if we can make it happen. So how am I going to make this work? All of this computation should be done only on the server. And we're going to get, what we want is to just have this letters with colors value. So I wonder if I can get, okay, letters. I'm going to use state. Whoops, deleted too much. So if I can use state will let me render, or it'll let me on the server put in a value and then have that hydrated back into this component properly. So I can get rid of keys and all that. I don't even need props, I don't think. Can we reduce it down to its essence? So use state key.letter. Why does it think that this is a number? Interesting. Okay, we're gonna try this out and see if it works. And then we're gonna be wrapping this up soon. So on this end, we're gonna have that. We don't need define emits, so we're gonna get rid of that. We're going to do all this stuff, and then we're gonna say letters with colors. Okay, here we've got letters. Okay, yeah, we're gonna call this letters with colors. Is it computed? We don't actually want to use it in use state. So what did I call it here? Letters. So instead of using that function to recompute it and as a computed value, we're going to pop it into the use state and use this as the initialization function. And I think that should be okay. We're going to need to restart because we got a bunch of new files in here. We'll see how she goes. So something is not working. I'm not able to click on these. They're all disabled. But not actually disabled? Okay, so something interesting is happening. Oh, because can guess not implemented on the client, I also need to have I need to have can guess. As a use state. Right. This is just if we've hit the limit of the guesses. Like we've already put in 5 letters. So here we go. We go const can s equals state. Yes. You. Okay, so that's working. But wait a second. How is it? Is it actually fetching the props on the server side? Why is it working? Oh boy. Let me see what is going on because I do not understand. I thought that this might work, but I'm actually surprised that it seems to be working. Oh, look at that. It actually is re-rendering it on the server. I thought that the client component would take over and hydrate. Maybe because I don't have props defined on here. I wonder if I define the props on here if it would be the same. What do I have in my game component? I have guesses and current guess. No, keyboard has guesses. So if I refreshed, but I have pass it as a prop, interesting. Okay. No, of course, that makes sense. Of course it makes sense that it works the way that it does. Yes, because if you wanted a component that would render one thing on the server and then hydrate and then just run this in the client, well, that's just like a regular Nuxt component. And you can do like the whole, you can wrap in on mounted or on Nuxt ready if you want to only run certain logic on the client. There's also the import.meta.client or server that you can check to see if you're on the server or on the client, so you can run specific logic in specific cases. So this actually does make a lot of sense the way that it works the way that it does, which is fantastic because this lets us do exactly what I was hoping that we could do, where the client does not have the answer shipped to it at all because it's all rendered on the server. Because we have this like split paired component setup going on. Hit enter. Okay. So that sort of works, but it doesn't seem like it is getting the keyboard to re-render correctly when we enter in a guess. So the letters with colors. Oh, actually, no, it's the word grid. Ugh, man, I'm just confusing myself here, aren't I? This is the fun part about live coding is looking at one thing and thinking that it's another thing. So if I hit this, it is, okay, so it is working the way that I had thought. The word grid is the component that is being re-rendered. Sorry for my mistake there. The word grid is being re-rendered every time we hit a new letter, just like before. And this keyboard is not. So what is happening is the server is going to render one thing, then it gets hydrated, and then it becomes a client component. So it acts as though it's like a regular Nuxt component, but you can just have different behavior defined for what happens on the server and what happens on the client. I'm just gonna, like, I want to log out to see why are these things not getting um why are they not getting rendered with the colors? I think it's because it's just not getting updated, because that initial call has access to the answer and will update the colors, but then every other call after that does not have access to the colors. So I think the only way to do this is to move this processing into an API call that the keyboard makes. And we can't have the rendering done on in the actual component itself. So that's a little annoying. Oh man, I was hoping that this would work. Okay. I was hoping that it would work. I wasn't confident that it would actually work. So, okay, we're going to then change everything back here. Muted. The nice thing here is that refactoring between computed and use state is pretty straightforward. So now we should have everything working back the way it was before. Nope. What is going on now? Right, we need the game has, we have our guesses, we have our answer. define emits. That's not correct. There we go. I don't care so much about the type safe version. Why is it still logging these things out? Oh, because we have this, we didn't delete this guy. Okay. Okay. Start it, and hopefully we're back to where we were before. All right, so there's no real good way of getting this keyboard component to be interactive, but also only have the answer on the server side. The way to do that would be to have a API call that tells us what keys are, or what letters are in the answer and which are not, and which are in the correct position. And then from there, we can figure out the coloring and have everything be nicely buttoned up. The answer is not being exposed on the client side. But for now, this is what we've got. And it works. We're going to just have the keyboard rendered on the client. And you'll see that when I hit enter, you'll see that the keyboard updates before the word grid. And that's because of that lag for the word grid to re-render on the server. Okay. So we've got a bunch of stuff in here so far. We've made it pretty far. Do I want to take 10 minutes now to put this thing on the server? Yeah, I think we will. I don't think we're going to get to making it responsive. I'm going to quickly, let's see if I can whip up API endpoint. We'll do letters, alt letters. Fine, event handler. And we're going to take, basically we're just going to take all of this logic. Actually, no, we're going to, so this letters with colors, we can leave that. It's the guesses with colors that we need the answer that logic we need to get rid of. So we need to replace that with the API endpoint. So we can do, I guess we'll just do, we can just reuse this use guesses. Answers, get answer. Nope, we're going to do read body. I think this is a promise. We have to await. I always forget that. Promise. Of course, because the utils, there's a difference between the nitro utils and the rest of the app utils. So this get answer is auto imported into our components on the view side of things, but not on the nitro side of things. We've got to explicitly import it here. We've got our answer. We're going to get our guesses. That's going to be passed in the JSON body. And then we're going to get use guesses. Guesses with colors. Use guesses. We're going to have to import that one as well. And then this should work. I think we're just going to pass back guesses with colors dot value. And I think it should be fine to use this because this is reactive. It's got, we're returning a ref. Processed guesses. Yeah, I don't know why. It thinks that this is, it's not returning any, it's returning this. Computed ref. There we go. Okay. So now let's go back to our keyboard. So guesses with colors now becomes guesses with colors, and we'll do a use fetch. I believe that makes sense to do use fetch. Although we're not able to do a get request because we're going to pass stuff into the body. And then where are we? I just want to do a $ fetch, but then it's not going to be active. Oh, and can guess is, we're just going to, we can simplify can guess to just say if you've got 6 letters, or if you have 5 letters or not. Actually, that's a little redundant. It was redundant to check if we have 5 letters, less than 5 letters, or doesn't match the answer. Well, it only will match the answer once you've put in 5 letters. So that condition doesn't make sense. Okay, going back to this though, instead of jumping around all over the place. Yeah, we've got a few minutes left. So let's make sure that we got this guesses with colors tidied up. If I do $fetch, I often forget the actual interface for this. If I want to do there we go. Okay, so if I do method and I do post and then I do body and I guess it, and then I do no wait on it, and then I refresh and I hope it all works. And of course it doesn't. Something happened. Use guesses. Okay, so we're in the Nitro section of our app. We don't have auto imports for ref and computed. We're just going to do this. And I mean, one way that we could do this is just to take this method, pull it out into utils. This composable could use that method. Our endpoint could use that method directly. because our endpoint here doesn't need any reactivity. I'm just doing this here because I am lazy. And clearly this is not working correctly. Oh, because I did a $ fetch and not a use fetch, of course. That's not reactive. I do? Couldn't tell you. Okay. What are my options for use fetch? Okay, so they're the same, plus I have some extra ones. So I can just fetch, but then I have to do data is guesses with colors. Guesses with colors, value. Okay, perfect. Then we've got some things going, and this will update correctly. And now we do not have the answer anywhere on the client side. And it took a little bit of figuring out to get to that point, but that was the whole point of this exercise. My whole challenge here was, can I build a version of Wordle with server rendered components where the answer is never exposed to the client side? And the simple way to do that, do not expose it to the client side, would just be to always use this API endpoints. But I wanted to see how far we could take these Nuxt Server Components, and it turns out that we can only take them so far, but we have learned a lot and seen some edge cases and figured some stuff out. There's a bunch of stuff that I didn't figure out as well, as is always the case. Some unanswered questions left to figure out. And I think that this is going to be it for Wordle, or Vuedle, I should say. I plan to deploy this. I might do a bit of cleaning up to make it responsive so we can play it on mobile, because I think right now the mobile experience is probably not going to be very good. I check iPhone 6. Yeah. So currently it is unplayable on mobile, but you know, that's all right. We'll get there eventually. And for my next streams, we'll see. I've already done 3 on Vuedle. I don't know that I want to keep going with this one too much longer. We might pivot to something else. Let me know in the comments what you think. You want to see something else? Want me to build something else, something interesting? Maybe try out a particular library or something like that. And yeah, see you in the next one.